Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Wire Wrap, our weekly show where we discuss developments during the ongoing Lok Sabha elections. With me today, there's Sushant Singh. He's a lecturer at Yale and consulting editor at the Caravan magazine, and Siddharth Varadarajan, founding editor of The Wire. Thank you both so much for joining me. The first thing I wanted us to talk about today, the speeches the Prime Minister has been giving on the campaign trail. Now, in previous episodes of this show, we've talked about his heightening communal rhetoric in certain places, and of course that has been continuing. He's recently said something to the lines of, if the Congress comes to power, they're going to fill the Indian cricket team with Muslims. But yesterday he said something that I think has left a lot of observers quite confused. He brought up the allegation that has been thrown at him by Rahul Gandhi and other opposition leaders about his close ties with businessmen Gautam Adani and Mukesh Ambani, and tried to reverse that charge by saying that why has Rahul Gandhi stopped talking about these two? Why has he no longer brought them up on his campaign trail? Now that's not true. He has, as have other Congress leaders. But what he said was even more interesting. He asked whether Rahul Gandhi has stopped making this allegation because these two businessmen had sent sackfuls and truckloads, tempo loads of cash, black money specifically, to the Congress office and made some sort of deal. Sushant, I want to start with you. Where has this come from? What is this new script?
I wish I knew where this has come from. Firstly, Jahnavi, thank you for asking me to be on the show. I think it took a lot of us by surprise, as you said, and of course, as with most things with Mr. Modi during this election campaign, it is based on an absolute falsehood. The Congress party, including Mr. Rahul Gandhi, have constantly mentioned Ambani and Adani, as various records have shown. In fact, people forget that Mr. Rahul Gandhi had actually mentioned Adani and Modi in April 2014, well before Mr. Modi became Prime Minister, at a campaign speech in J&K where he's sitting with Omar Abdullah. That video clip is going around. So it is not that he was not saying it before 2014 or only started with Rafale. He has constantly been talking about these ties. So it's based on a falsehood, but falsehoods are something which we have come to expect from Mr. Modi constantly. Everything from the Indian cricket team to Mangal Sutra to Muslim League, we have seen this constantly day in and day out. What to me is most interesting is that both Gautam Adani and Mukesh Ambani are seen to be close to the establishment, close to be seen to the government, and particularly Gautam Adani. Mr. Modi flew down after he was elected as the Prime Minister in a Gautam Adani aeroplane. The picture is, of course, there. It was not a tempo by any chance. And for him to actually, in a sense, throw them under the bus and say that they are both corrupt, to say that they are dealing in black money, and to say that they are using tempos to send black money, like seriously, Mr. Adani and Mr. Ambani can probably, afford better vehicles. They can probably afford more stylish trucks or something, more refrigerated trucks, but probably an aeroplane, a helicopter, what have you. They could probably do that. So I think for him to throw them under the bus, and that is a kind of a surprise. What actually even a bigger surprise is that the Indian media was completely confused. Half the Indian mainstream media is owned by these two gentlemen, and they were completely confused as to how they should respond to this charge, which mimics what Rahul Gandhi had said, and we have seen it in today's newspapers, where people are completely confused as to what should we make of this charge. Of course, a lot of people will try and see political strategy in it. A lot of people will try and say, oh, this thing. But I think it's a sign of desperation. It's a sign of something where a political leader is trying to clutch at straws and trying to somehow, reverse the narrative and kind of say something which sticks. If you look at over the last 3 to 4 weeks, he has thrown muck at everything and just hoping like hell that something sticks. This is very different from 2014 and 2019. 2014 was about hope, achhe din, anti-corruption, there's horrible UPA government, etc., etc. 2019 was national security. I'll keep this country secure. Vote for national security. Vote for me. Over the last 4-5 weeks, Mr. Modi has moved from here to here to here. He's been talking about all kinds of issues and throwing all kinds of muck and hoping that some muck will stick, and then probably he can take on from there. And this is another step in that same direction.
Yeah, I mean, it also provided an opening for Rahul Gandhi to respond and say that, wow, this is interesting that you brought this up, and it seems like the Prime Minister is saying he's aware of some large black money racket, and immediately the ED should investigate what Adani and Ambani are doing. So Siddharth, I want you to talk about this also. I think, what's going on?
No, I think it's an astonishing, self-goal, I think, by Mr. Modi. I can't, imagine what sort of benefit he hoped to get from this kind of an allegation, because the photographs which are there for everybody to see on the internet are of Mr. Modi either traveling on Adani's plane or lounging on one of his aircraft when he was chief minister. It's an old relationship. Yeah. And the one company which got away with using Mr. Modi's photograph in an ad was Reliance Jio, when Mukesh Ambani launched his telecoms company, right? So the proximity between Modi and these two gentlemen is not a secret. He's been relentlessly targeted by Rahul Gandhi for the Adani-Ambani and Soot Boot Ki Sarkar, all of these phrases we've heard. Either Mr. Modi feels that this charge is sticking or has stuck, and he's desperately trying to get out of it. He made cryptic remarks in the aftermath of the electoral bonds scam details coming out, when he and Mr. Amit Shah tried to say that let all the details come out. It's the opposition which will look embarrassed. But there's nothing in that data. Of course, I think there are plenty of companies that the opposition shouldn't have taken money from, and one can certainly ask legitimate questions to them or of them. But the same is true for the BJP on a much larger magnitude. So Modi clearly has not found anything to embarrass the opposition with from the electoral bond data. If anything, speaking about electoral bonds will only remind the electorate about how crooked the whole scam was.
Yeah. And including one company very closely linked to Reliance that bought bonds for the BJP.
So the bulk of money from that company went to the BJP. But what I find interesting is the speed with which Rahul Gandhi was able to turn this around, right? So it was a very, Congress party has been quite on point in this election as far as its social media strategy is concerned. Much better than in the past, but this was really quite brilliant. I mean, Rahul Gandhi shooting a casual video in front of a portrait of Mahatma Gandhi, and essentially laying before Mr. Modi this question of, have you told the ED and the CBI? Which is a question every Indian has to ask, because if indeed this is the case, then this is the case crying out for investigation. Modi has not done that clearly, right? And the other question he asked, which is interesting, is how do you know that cash is delivered in tempos? Is that your experience? And that kind of reminded me of the piece that we ran in the Wire by M. Rajshekhar on the Bharatiya Janata Party's finances, right? We know that there is a gap conservatively estimated at 60,000 crore rupees, perhaps a bit more, between the party's declared income over the past decade and a reasonable estimate of what it spent its money on, right? And we see that if it's declared income of around 40,000 crore, it seems to have spent upwards of 1 lakh crore, in terms of building party offices around the country. Every district has a pretty posh new BJP office built over the last 4 or 5 years. They lavishly spend in election campaigns. And Rajshekhar, did a kind of back of the envelope calculation and came up with this huge gap, right? So the question is, clearly the BJP has spent. So where's that money come from? Is Mr. Modi hinting at where the answer might lie? Which is why I think that this is a kind of astonishing own goal, because if you're a politician accused of taking money from the biggest guys and who's clearly outspending everybody else, and who doesn't hesitate to unleash your ED and CBI at people, you keep thinking noto ka bhandar mila hai, or he's made all these accusations. In the case of that TMC guy, they found all this cash. So here you're speaking of being in the knowledge of cash being transported by tempo. So why haven't you acted, right? This is a logical question, but it's a logical question only if we are in a normal media landscape, which, as Sushant says, we are not. So TV channels yesterday were confused, and of course it became very convenient for the media and for the BJP to latch on to this kind of random and slightly bizarre, poorly phrased statement of Sam Pitroda, and to make this the biggest issue, since sliced bread, when what Mr. Modi said on Adani-Ambani is arguably one of the more shocking things about this campaign. And it's not getting the kind of focus or that big media has to ought to give it.
Yeah, just to add to that, the only way it can make sense is that Mr. Modi is saying, oh, I may be friends with Ambani and Adani, my party may be taking, corruption money from them, but so is Rahul Gandhi doing it, so is the Congress party doing it. So, to use that old Hindi phrase, is "Hamam mein sab nange hain," like everybody is naked in this Turkish bath. So, don't single me out. That's the only thing by far I can think of in any sense of strategy or otherwise.
Even then, not really, since he's suggesting this is suddenly a deal they've struck.
I see, apart from the mode of payment, right, where he says cash, right, which obviously you have to then investigate, right, if you have this kind of, even if you speculate or you think or you have information, right. But secondly, we know that in a kind of the kind of economy and society we have, parties are taking money from businesses, right. They do take money. We hope that this money is in the form of check and transparent. It may not always be. What concerns electors is whether this money has resulted in the purchase of influence. And in the case of Adani and Ambani, the Congress has been able to lay allegations. One can't say they're proven until finally they are investigated and tried. But the Congress and the opposition have laid allegations of blatant favoritism by the Modi government towards Mr. Adani, towards Mukesh Ambani, other business houses over the past decade, right? And, so either the Prime Minister is in a position to point to comparable, deals, and maybe he should look at and talk about the Congress ran state governments in Chhattisgarh and in Rajasthan, and there was talk of chief ministers there being, doing business with Mr. Adani. So if the Prime Minister has something, he should speak, but he will not do that, right? Because even in the case, I want to take viewers back to the allegations against Robert Vadra. Why did the allegations against Robert Vadra flounder? They floundered for a very simple reason, that if you want to pin an allegation of wrongdoing on Robert Vadra over land dealings, the finger will also point at a company called DLF. And DLF, if you see the electoral bonds data and even open data, is a big donor of the BJP. Yeah. Right? So somewhere down the line, na khaunga, na khane dunga, this phrase of Mr. Modi, which he used to win the election in 2014 and has kind of somehow sustained the myth of incorruptibility and so on. This has completely frayed and become tattered. Yeah. And I see Modi's comments in Telangana as some kind of an attempt to get out of a hole that he finds himself in. And I don't think the public is going to buy it.
Yes, two more things. One is he claimed in 2016 after demonetization that black money was already over in India. Yeah. So one is black money. Secondly, he also claimed that he can send a drone everywhere and keep an eye on this. So probably he knows the tempo number which he can give to the CBI and do it. But more seriously, he's coming across in this campaign as a very tired campaigner who's unable to, using the kind of words and language which doesn't seem to enthuse even his core supporters or his core support base. It is almost like flogging a dead horse. He's constantly trying to push and poke and hoping that the dead horse will rise. I'm not saying that Mr. Modi will not win this election or his voters will not vote for the election. Right. But the kind of fervor, the enthusiasm, the kind of passion that you would see from his supporters, that is clearly not visible. He comes across as tired, he comes across as jaded, he comes across as incoherent, he comes across as illogical, he comes across as a liar, which is the biggest thing, which is the worst thing you can say about a Prime Minister. He holds a very high office. You can constantly pinpoint the number of lies that he has spoken. And that doesn't really augur well for India, for Indian democracy, and for the Indian people.
I think, speaking of lies, we can move on to our next topic.
I can't resist a joke though. The buffalo thing that he said, right? अगर आपके पास दो भैंस हैं तो Congress will take one away. So Mr. Modi has two businessman friends, and is he accusing? This is a joke on the internet. Is he accusing the Congress of taking one away?
So the internet is full of memes and jokes like every day. This is like a gold mine for people. Yeah. The people are going on and on from Lapta lads to what have we.
Yeah. Speaking of the Lapata lads, which is a reference to the Election Commission and its role in this election, and the way several complaints that have been made about model code of conduct violations have basically gone unheard or been reacted to in weird ways, like telling X or Twitter to take down a video but not telling the BJP that you should take down this video. Earlier this week on Tuesday, we saw the third phase of voting. This was in 93 constituencies, 10 of which were in Uttar Pradesh. This phase in Uttar Pradesh saw a lot of complaints from both voters and opposition parties who claim that specific areas where there is a high Muslim population, the police and the administration made an effort to not allow everyone to vote. There were some reports that the police was lathi charging people inside polling booths. There were others that electoral officers were rejecting people who came to vote on grounds that were seen as dubious, like claiming that they had fake Aadhaar cards. The police and the administration have both denied this claim. The police said they were just managing crowds, and the electoral officers had said that they actually found people who were trying to use fake ID to vote. The Lucknow electoral authorities have admitted that this phase did see a lot more complaints, but said that there was no big untoward incident, so that's okay. The Samajwadi Party has said that the BJP administration was specifically targeting booths where it knew that the opposition was stronger. Yesterday, the EC released some data that said this phase saw 57.55% voter turnout. Now, this is not the first time that UP under Adityanath has seen this sort of allegation. In December 2022, there was a by-poll in Rampur in which there were similar allegations of the police using violence and other methods to stop Muslim voters from casting their vote, and that election had a 27.8% turnout. Siddharth, what do you make of the allegations and overall the way that they are being dealt with? Do you think it questions the trust voters may have in these Lapata lads?
Well, I think that the problem with the functioning of the Election Commission goes well beyond these allegations that we've seen in Uttar Pradesh. I think what we have seen from UP is very serious and ought to be investigated and so on and so forth. I don't see that happening, but this is the tip of the iceberg as far as the functioning of this EC is concerned. The problem with the Election Commission is well documented. The Supreme Court itself last year noted how the constitutional provision for mandating the independence of the commission is compromised by the fact that the composition of the members, the composition of the commission is wholly determined by the executive. This may not have been a serious issue in the past. I think it ought to have been addressed, of course, in the 50s or 60s, but people went along with it because governments maybe exercised some discretion, some modicum of objectivity in picking election commissioners, or perhaps once the election commissioners were chosen, even if they were chosen for the wrong reasons, rose to the job and delivered, acted in a fairly independent professional fashion. So we've seen in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even as recently as the 2014 election, very few allegations being raised by the opposition or the wider sort of civil society or body politic about any bias in the functioning of the EC. With these guys, the allegations have mounted, and examples are staring you in the face of bias, particularly from, say, the 2019 election, when Ashok Lavasa registered the sole dissent. He was hit with Pegasus spyware, as we showed, and then he was eased out of the commission on the basis, he resigned, but I think he was eased out on the basis of kind of spurious allegations of corruption and a kind of smear campaign in the media. The Supreme Court, taking note of this, said that you should have an independent panel where the PM gets one vote, the leader of the opposition gets the second, and a third person unconnected to these two, and they suggested the CJI should be the third person. The Modi government then legislates, creates a panel, but it knocks the CJI out and replaces him with Amit Shah. Or, Amit Shah is the guy they chose, but another minister, right? So, Modi and Amit Shah are going to pick election commissioners, and we seriously expect that they're going to be independent given the way in which they have staffed every other institution in this country, right? So clearly the way these gentlemen are behaving is exactly as everybody feared. What is shocking and sad is that the Supreme Court didn't recognize this in time and act and stop this. But the way in which these guys have conducted themselves, I think, is utterly disgraceful. UP, you can give them the benefit of doubt. They're not on the ground. Lots of moving parts in an election. Sure. But when complaints are moved to the EC directly, I know for a fact that within hours of that horrible video by the BJP in Karnataka, the communal video which you've, I think, spoken about also, was uploaded. Within hours, the Chief Election Commissioner was informed of this via WhatsApp. And so that's Saturday itself. And the Commission waits a full 3 or 4 days, before they finally issue notice and demand the tweet is taken on to Twitter. Now, Twitter doesn't report to the Election Commission, but in an election, the Bharatiya Janata Party does. There is no way the Bharatiya Janata Party can ignore an instruction from the Election Commission. So, what prevented the Election Commission, if this tweet is objectionable, which it clearly is, why didn't they on Saturday itself, or even on Sunday or Monday? Why did they not tell Mr. Nadda that you have to delete this? Right? They don't do that. And this is one of many, many examples. I mean, Modi's speech after speech, he spewed hatred, and they've tried to make an example of odd comments by the former Telangana Chief Minister and so on to say that we're acting against kind of big guys. But proof of the pudding is when Modi is universally being acknowledged by, and it's not just people like us or the opposition or, civil society critics. Big media, big newspapers have noted in their editorials how atrocious Mr. Modi's, campaigns, the relentless targeting of Muslims. These guys are completely silent, right? So I think this has completely compromised the, the nature of the election. It'll be a miracle if you have an outcome that shocks and hurts Mr. Modi, given the way in which the Election Commission is conducting the election. And add to that the kind of examples you are giving of this micro level. I'm not even going into questions people raise about EVMs and so on, because that's kind of a dead end in the absence of clear, concrete evidence. But the fear of preventing voters, right? That's the ultimate. That's the mother of all rigging. Na? That if you stop a voter, and this is like 19th century US, right? After the ending of slavery, how did the southern states prevent African Americans from voting? You introduce all kinds of qualifications, introduce all kinds of restrictions, and even when those are satisfied, you then use physical force, right? So that's this is not surprising, but we are seeing evidence of this, and I think this adds an sort of additional disturbing layer to what is already a pretty dismal picture.
Two more points to add to what Siddharth said. One is on the biases. Most people do not realize that the Election Commission actually stopped Telangana government from paying money under the regular schemes on which money was being paid till the time voting happens. But it has not done the same for central government schemes, for the schemes that are run by the Modi government. I think it also did the same for Andhra government. And the court intervened, and so that is clear, clear bias. One is their bias. These three election commissioners are biased. Their conduct is extremely disgraceful and shameful, completely not befitting an election commissioner, especially with the kind of election commissioners that we have had over the last 20-30 years. Some of the people, even people like S.Y. Qureshi, people like T.N. Seshan, they have conducted themselves with a certain amount of grace, with a certain amount of fairness, with a certain amount of objectivity. You could not look at them and say, oh, this guy is doing a favor to the people, those in power. But I think this equally important point is that this set of election commissioners particularly is also incompetent. They are actually not competent people to conduct elections. Election commissioners used to come after every round of polling and face the media, talk about the number of votes. These guys are unable to tell you how many votes have been polled. Yeah. What kind of election commission are they running? What kind of election are they running? These guys are absolutely incompetent. They should be ashamed of themselves that they are holding such high constitutional offices and they cannot do this basic function. These guys have been IAS officers for 40 years, 35, 40 years. They know how the system works. You can't basically tell me how many votes have been polled. You're going to tell me after 10 days, 11 days that 65.3% votes were polled and not tell me how many votes were exactly polled in a place. That's a percentage of. What is that a percentage of? You do not take cognizance of these simple complaints. These guys have conducted elections in districts. Don't they know how district officials behave? Can't they see how the cop is behaving in Sambhal? The reports are very clear. The same guy, the same circle officer was posted in Rampur when that Rampur incident took place, where the BJP won. The same guy is now posted in Sambhal. There's a whole report in Caravan reported about it. They've tried to intimidate pradhans. They have tried to intimidate people who are likely to support the opposition candidates. Told them to stay in the background, not come and canvass. And what we have seen in Sambhal is that clearly you are trying to disenfranchise a certain section of people because you believe they are going to vote. And then the election commission on top of that says, oh, we want more and more people to come out and vote. Is this the way more and more people are going to come out and vote? And the whole conduct with, as Siddharth said, the whole conduct with the Twitter thing and the BJP is supposed to follow the model code of conduct. You need to pull up the BJP. You are telling Twitter to take down that video. It's absolutely ridiculous. And somebody, perhaps the Supreme Court of India needs to take a suo motu cognizance. There's a reason the Supreme Court exists, and there's a whole history in India where the Supreme Court of India takes suo motu cognizance of serious issues. And what can be more serious than a conduct of a free and fair election in a democracy? If the elections are not free and fair, then the government which is elected, whether it is Mr. Modi's or anyone else's, would not have any credibility. It would not be seen as having been fairly elected, both internally and externally. That could cause all kinds of turmoil, all kinds of trouble, all kinds of questions could emerge. Do you really want to end up in a scenario like that? The Supreme Court should take note of this. The CJI should take note of this.
And even when they told Twitter finally, I mean, it was sweetly timed, because you issue your instruction when polling in Karnataka is finished, right? So the BJP comes up with this awful ad aimed at the Karnataka voter, and you let it sit online for 4 or 5 days, and then finally when polling is over, you say, "Acha, isko hata do." What kind of...
Only thing that is left is these three guys not wearing that Bhagwa, whatever that is, the BJP symbol on their around their necks, the BJP scarves around the neck. Or maybe we will see, like we saw with with CJI Gogoi, when we were holding hands and saying this was having a glass of wine after this X video was uploaded or something. Maybe we'll see in one of the memoirs after that, because this is the kind of ridiculous level to which we have reached.
Yeah, no, I think what we've been talking about is an institution that's supposed to bear witness and act in these situations and is failing to do so. But when it comes to bearing witness, there was a recent report that came up with some interesting results. Now, one of the things that Modi and his supporters have been talking about during his 10 years in power is how he has apparently made India a Vishwaguru, a nation that all other countries look up to. But two academics, Irfan Nuruddin and Ritumbra Manuvi, have recently released a report where they've collated different surveys conducted in different countries, not with politicians or those in power, but with common people. One of them, the GlobeScan report, looked at people in the UK, the US and France, and came up with some interesting results. Now, 89% of their respondents thought that India needs to take their human rights concerns and democracy more seriously than it is at the moment. 3 out of 4 were concerned about laws that they think, new laws that are being passed in India, that they think are targeting Muslims and making it harder for them to be citizens of this country. There was also a recent YouGov poll in which only 10% of respondents in the UK and 22% in the US had a positive view of Narendra Modi himself. In a recent remark, the US President Joe Biden said, he was talking about his own immigration policy, and said that it was not like the Modi regime's, because it was not xenophobic, and in saying that, he clubbed India along with Russia, China and Japan. Another interesting data point from the GlobeScan study was that 90% of respondents expressed concerns about reports of alleged assassination attempts, one assassination of citizens of Canada and the US, Sikh citizens, on their country's soil, which had alleged Indian government involvement. Recently, the Washington Post had a report in which it named the raw official that it said was responsible, played a part in this alleged assassination. A Canadian publication recently had a report on how Justin Trudeau's plane in 2018 was not allowed to land in Punjab until he agreed to a meeting with authorities about the Indian government's concerns about Sikh terrorists in Canada. So they had to take the meeting, they took it, but apparently found nothing actionable in any of the documentation that was shared with them. Sushant, what do you think the Modi years have meant for India globally?
So, as you said, if the data is there, the data speaks for itself. The fact is, and globally, and I know you can look at it in 2 or 3 ways within South Asia itself. India, India might have had problems with the governments. Whether it was the Khaleda Zia government in Bangladesh, or with the royalists in Nepal, but India was always very popular amongst the normal people. What we saw in Bangladesh when Mr. Modi visited last time, 18 people were shot dead in riots because they were protesting against Mr. Modi's visit because of the CAA. There were 400 people who were injured. When is the last time that an Indian Prime Minister went to a country in South Asia and there were people killed in riots protesting against that visit? So, even within South Asia, which is India's neighborhood, where we have cultural similarities, where we have cultural bonds, where India had massive soft power, that soft power has been, the first thing is that has been completely eroded. the idea that India is going to become a great power, which is being sold here by the likes of Mr. Jaishankar, who acts as his mouthpiece, and tries to snub people while Mr. Modi hugs people, doesn't really go anywhere. Because at the end of the day, the fact that India is going to be the third largest economy is a natural consequence of the kind of country that we are. It has nothing to do with Mr. Modi or Jaishankar or Nirmala Sitharaman. Whoever becomes the next prime minister, even then India will become the third largest economy. The fact that India is located in a place where China is the rising global power, and the United States and the West want to counter China, does put India in a kind of a sweet spot till the time there is no conflict with China. If there's a real conflict with China, then a lot of other questions will emerge. But what I can say from my own experience, and having just returned from the US, in DC, is the question which you constantly hear in DC think tanks and people who are associated, whether on the Hill or within the administration, is at least a significant section of voices asking the question, what kind of India are we supporting? In trying to tackle China, what kind of India are we supporting? And would a decade or two later down the line, would we be wondering that did we do the right thing by supporting India? And those kind of questions are more and more being asked. And they are being asked because of the treatment of religious minorities in India. They are being asked because of human rights concerns in India, because of targeting of journalists, because of targeting of civil society organizations, because of the kind of speeches that Mr. Modi gives and uses, and of course because of the transnational killings or the alleged transnational killings that have taken place in North America. All in all, in the last 10 years, India has lot of traction and a lot of soft power. India has not really become that powerful a country where it can influence anything. It can't even influence Maldives. It can't even influence Nepal to take back that currency note. Forget about, projecting power abroad. India is not China. India is definitely not the United States. India doesn't control its own region well. So the power bit is overblown. We should realize that the strength that we had was as a liberal democracy, as a country where other people looked up to us in what is now called the global south or the developing world. We have lost that traction. We have lost that soft power, and that is not going to be easy to regain.
Would you agree with that, Siddharth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the mistake Modi supporters and the sort of wider Godi media, sort of cheerleaders of Mr. Modi in India have made, is to confuse motivated flattery by foreign governments with, confuse that with sort of genuine Indian influence. When a US trade representative makes a public statement as to how awesome Modi is and how he's the best leader and so on, there is obviously an agenda that she's pursuing, which he reckons will, be more likely to be accomplished with this kind of flattery than if she were to say something else, right?
Which also says something that they think.
Well, everybody loves flattery, but I fear and suspect that Indian leaders are perhaps even more susceptible to this, right? But I think that the world has played Mr. Modi really, really well, right? So they've sort of stroked his ego, flattered him, given him plenty of material and ammunition that he can use to sort of, tom-tom his so-called accomplishments for people at home and so on and so forth. The reality is something very, very different. The survey shows that public perceptions are very, very different. And even if one sort of questions the methodology and makes arguments with that, because recognition of a global leader also depends on how closely somebody follows the news, what's the nature of that news, etc. But even when you standardize for everything, the fact that Mr. Modi is not what the BJP loves to say, the world's most popular leader, right? You see these sort of spurious surveys being quoted from time to time. This is a more genuine survey, right? So the public is aware, the global public is aware. I would say the global public is more aware today than it was, say, 5 or 7 years ago, because the global media has also woken up to the harsh reality of what is happening in India.
Also, some of them from experience.
Well, the fact is that the government of India, under Mr. Modi, has de facto expelled more journalists in the last 5 years from India than the government of China has. And that's an astonishing record, where you don't renew somebody's visa. And what's more, the Chinese are quite subtle. Like when they kick somebody out, they may not publicly state the reasons. Here, these people are called in and said, your coverage is bad, and they're upbraided about individual stories. We heard the lecture of this New York Times woman where she said how chai pe charcha with the minister turned into just a sort of litany of complaints against individual stories, right? So this kind of mentality, doesn't, win India points as far as global public opinion is concerned, and so that's the reality. But I think where Mr. Modi and his team have crossed a line. Because it's one thing if a leader is not popular or a party is not popular, or if a government, the world at large has suspicions about a particular government. What we don't want is, under any circumstances, is India's hard-earned reputation as an upstanding member of the international community, as a country that takes a stand on principle when it comes to respect for national sovereignty, when it comes to operating within international law. These are hard-earned credentials that successive prime ministers have given, right? And when you have adventurism, for want of a better term, you mentioned these allegations of assassinations and planned assassinations on foreign soil. Friends and allies don't do this to each other. Or they don't do this to each other unless they have completely lost all sense of costs, of figuring out costs and benefits, right? So to shoot or to organize the shooting of I would call him a retired Khalistani extremist, or a retired, like Nijjar may still be a separatist in terms of his views, but is he really the kind of threat to the Indian state that the government claims that he was? Pannu, for example, if indeed he is, where is the red corner notice that the government of India has issued to Interpol? Where is the extradition request? If Pannu is the dangerous terrorist, he's a distasteful chap. Frankly, all his comments are really horrible and objectionable. But has the government of India, if it says it has evidence, moved the US system as it is his right under the extradition treaty to get hold of this guy? No, right? So it's all political posturing, and when you add to this political posturing recklessness of a magnitude of where you are kind of not only घर में घुस के, but आप घर में घुस के पकड़े भी जा रहे हो, right? What you're saying, the incompetence, right? It's the even if you set aside questions of morality, because it can easily be said that every country breaks the law, etc., when there are reasons of state, but this is rank incompetence, right? And the Biden administration has played this beautifully. Like, so they have calibrated the release of information. They've gone along with Mr. Modi saying, I'm going to investigate this. And frankly, I think it's the US, and not, long after Biden is gone and long after Modi is gone, this wretched incident where the US has or says it has evidence tying India to this kind of a plot will be used to extract concessions, or they will try to use it to extract concessions from successive Indian governments. So this is not just about image. So we can say, oh, I don't care what foreigners think, I don't care what global public opinion thinks. But when you weaken India's negotiating hand, when you create liabilities for future governments and future generations, I think that's unforgivable. And this is Mr. Modi's greatest sin on the world front. Everything that Sushant has said about messing up the neighborhood is true. Whether it's with Bangladesh, Nepal, the Maldives, Pakistan, of course, China. Chinese soldiers have been nibbling away, and now every day we read stories of Indian soldiers, of course, but also shepherds and others being unable to access areas that they could access earlier. So fine, yeah, in legal technical terms, because this is all undefined or undemarcated, so the government can say not an inch has been taken away. But the reality is, your people used to go there unhindered, and they can't anymore. And that area is several hundred, if not more, square kilometers, right? So this is the harsh reality that I think should concern Indians much more than the issue of global reputation. Reputation, of course, is a product of what you do, and what the government has been doing is pretty awful.
Yeah, Papa ne war rukwa di. I think that's what it is. So
Yeah.
it has been mocked so much
It has.
that the BJP is not really going with it.
Yeah.
So that is the way people look at it. And just to add to Siddharth's point,
I mean, the ministry had to say कि war नहीं रखवाई, so
Papa ने war नहीं रुकवाई. मतलब like so, and the G20 summit was made up, like as if something really transformative had happened.
yeah, I mean, you can't go 10 meters even now without seeing those signs.
Yeah, but what is G20? G20, how many people know when the G20 foreign ministers meeting was happening? Mr. Jaishankar did not, in Brazil, because Brazil is the current chair, Mr. Jaishankar did not attend because he was attending the Raisina dialogue. So, this is G20. G20 is a talk shop at the end of it. The G7 matters. G7 does something that's very coherent, Western-dominated thing. G20 is really not a big deal. It was a rotational presidency, but that was made out like, it's the greatest achievement that has ever been done by India. India had hosted NAM summit and done whatnot. And even if the idea is to become a great power or a leading power, as Mr. Modi and Jaishankar call it, even if the idea is to become a leading power, what kind of leading power would India would be? What is India's vision? What are India's values? And where do you want to see India to be classified as? Unfortunately, today, India is seen in the league with Russia, Turkey, Hungary, and the kind of countries whom you do not wish to be identified with at any point of time. You are seen as an authoritarian, majoritarian, nationalist, populist country, which is not what you want. Which is not the kind of reputation you want. These are reputations which will not be salvaged easily. It will take a long time. And these have consequences for normal people. The people who are currently dominating the Ivy League universities or technology companies in the West, they are dominating because of what India did in the last 70 years. Imagine what will happen to the people who are now going to go out of this system. How would they be accepted in the West? Look at the example of Zia's Pakistan. This is what precisely Zia's Pakistan did. It destroyed the schooling, it made it nationalist, it made a religious majoritarian thing. And what did it lead to? What did it lead to? The kind of people who went abroad. When you go and talk to people, academics abroad, you say, people who come out of the Pakistani school system. And now most of the people who go abroad are actually not coming out of the Pakistani school system. They're coming out of A-level, O-level system. But people who used to come out of Pakistani school system had no understanding of real history. They did not know why East Pakistan went away. They did not know what happened in 1947. And my fear is that the current schooling system that we are producing, because of this politics, is going to create a similar breed of people who, when they go abroad, will not be treated with this same kind of, deference, etc. The IITs and IIMs were not created by Mr. Modi; they were created by Nehru, and they are the people who are sending Sundar Pichais of the world and the other people of the world who have gone there. So this is going to be a long-term damage, which is not going to be only internal; it is going to be external, and it is going to have massive consequences. The reputational risks, as Siddharth said, are going to be huge.
Just before we close, one last thing I wanted to ask you about, perception globally and the reputation that India has. This view of India having the ability to be some sort of voice of the global south, I think has also, you mentioned the neighborhood already, but even in general has come under even further question recently because of the way India has been voting in the UN on the situation in Gaza. Siddharth, would you talk a little bit about that?
Mr. Modi achieved some degree of fame a couple of years ago when he made this kind of throwaway remark in the context of Russia and Ukraine, that today is not the era of war. Frankly, I don't know what he meant, because he followed that up a couple of weeks later with advice to President Zelensky saying that, a war is not the answer to your problem. I mean, here's a country fighting against a foreign invasion and occupation, and he's telling him don't fight. But anyway, the fact is that in reality, for the two biggest conflicts of our era, dangerous, deadly conflicts in the case of Gaza, genocidal war by Israel, India is missing in action from the peace camp. We've seen from the stories by Dr. R. Ramachandran that India may actually be supplying war material, the form of drones and other munitions, to the Israeli side. So we're actually on the negative, sort of bloody side of the ledger. But let's ignore that for a second. Where is India in terms of the urgent search for a global solution to the end of these two wars? There's going to be a big conference in Switzerland sometime in the summer, where India is one of 100 countries invited. But even if Mr. Modi or the next Prime Minister, if it's not Mr. Modi, even if an Indian Prime Minister goes, what is the concrete sort of solution that India is going to take as a major country, as a self-styled leader of the global south, Do we have a solution for what's happening for what Russia has done to Ukraine? I don't think we do. It's not that we lack leverage, it's not that we lack influence, but there's an unwillingness to even think about these problems. And when it comes to Israel and Palestine, I would say that, of course, South Africa, which moved the International Court of Justice, but Brazil, which has been very clear in labeling what Israel is doing as a genocide. Nicaragua, which went to the ICJ against German arms exports. China, of course. Many countries of the global south have played an active role in, seeking an urgent end. India's vote record has been patchy. Of course, officially we now stand for a ceasefire, but India refused to endorse the call for an arms embargo. So I think that this claim of India being a leader of global, that bus has left the terminal. You have other countries that are, fighting for the interests of global south much better than what India is doing.
Yeah.
And what's worse is to what Siddharth said is India is actually asking young Indian men to go and work in Israel.
Yeah.
What is going on here? Like,
Yeah.
This is one. And people forget this very quickly. India is the only country, in fact, the only country, forget being a major country, which supports both Putin and Bibi. There is no other country in the world which supports both Putin and Bibi at the same time. India supports the Taliban in Afghanistan. India supports the junta in Myanmar. What kind of policies are these? This is not realism. I am sorry. Realism has to be, there have to be a certain idea of what kind of values does India stand for. This is the biggest question. What kind of vision do you stand for? I don't think India stands for anything. And if you don't stand for anything, you will fall for everything.
That's, a sobering note, but I think we can end there for today. Thank you both so much for joining me, and thank you all for watching. I hope you'll watch again next week.